There we go. Well, good morning, good evening, as the case may be, all around the world. And today we have another globe-spanning Conversations with Jack. Billy Rennekamp from the Interchain Foundation, thank you very much for joining us, is over in Berlin. And we have Sisla, as always, in India, and I am on the west coast of California. But before we dive in here, just want to take a quick second to say thank you to our sponsors this morning. First is Sommelier.finance, the easiest way to add liquidity on Uniswap v3. We also have been working on launching our mainnet this week and have a lot of very exciting announcements coming up soon. I know I've been teasing this for a while, and it's probably going to be 2 months of teasing before you hear anything, which, you know, that's the way blockchains work. And we also have OmniFlix.network, which is, I think Sisla and team are working on their second major testnet, gearing up towards a mainnet here soon. I know that they have a lot of exciting announcements. And Sisla, you are quickly becoming the most requested guest on Conversations with Jack. So we're going to have to do that sooner rather than later. All right. Well, Billy, thank you for joining us. And do you mind giving folks a little bit of an introduction and telling them what you're working on these days?
Yeah. Thanks very much for having me. Excited to be here. So I'm the Cosmos Hub product lead, but I've been around the space for a while doing a bunch of different things at different periods. I've been working mostly in the ETH space before. Was early working with NFTs, bonding curves, market makers, prediction markets, DAOs, all the fun, shiny stuff. Along that path, I was doing a little bit of work, front-end dev for Tendermint on the original Looney project.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
I was just hidden in the Berlin offices working 20 hours a week, not talking to anybody, and then going back to ETH space while everyone was trying to ship the Cosmos SDK before even launching the hub, because that's what the priorities were. But
building an NFT module on the SDK back in the day too.
Exactly, yeah. But once Cosmos started actually, getting to the point that people could start building things, which is what I was interested in doing all along, is building things, I started turning my focus there. It was right after I launched Clovers network on Ethereum, which was the #1 gas guzzler for like a week straight. We had a real great sort of launch. The economics were so perfectly balanced, though, that they didn't incorporate the idea that gas might change from $1 per transaction to hundreds of dollars per transaction. The economics of that game, of course, is like sort of targeting people who are making 50 cents or $1 on these sort of like weird activities that you force them to do. So as soon as the gas prices are so high, the whole thing just breaks down. That's when I started taking Cosmos really seriously and was like, all right, I'm going to put all my efforts into pushing this tech to the point that it is the absolute best choice for building my blockchain applications, decentralized apps. And so really put my shoulder to the wheel, became full-time. I was doing developer relations for a long time with Tendermint, doing a lot of talks, workshops. That's when I was building the NFT module. And then in 2020, shifted over to the Interchain Foundation to start building out the engineering capacity there, operating the funding program, doubled the team size, and now I've shifted over to product inside the Cosmos Hub.
I mean, Billy, just one of those average Cosmos people who has 15 different hats on at a time. Before we, there it is, rocket, let's go. Before we dig into the sort of core of this conversation, which is ask not what Cosmos can do for you, ask what you can do for Cosmos. And what are the major areas where we really need help, and sort of why is that? I did want to briefly just talk to folks about the art that you make, which I find wonderful. Billy mentioned Clovers.network, but the sort of core of your heart has always been about sport and the way that humans interact with sport in this sort of, digital realm. Do you mind just saying a little bit about that for folks?
Yeah, I think if you try to unpack a lot of the work that I was making and why I was making it, it had a lot to do with, being really attracted to the structures and the systems that were involved, especially in sports and games. Just purely aesthetically, there's something extremely, satisfying. I mean, watching these sorts of games, very modernist, primary objects, primary colors, and things like that. But there's also something really beautiful about the functionality of these things. It's actually why they're determined. It's easier to use them. It's easier to understand where the line is, what's in, what's out. Also in terms of like friction on like the textures and the materials. These are all sort of like things that are meant to be touched and used. And it was almost sort of like exploding those systems in order to interrogate those aspects of it as much as possible. And I was doing something similar with software along the line. So I was doing it with video games and even mathematics and things like that. And so even Othello, this board game, is where Clovers came out of. It was like, oh, this is like a beautiful game with really cool rules. I don't really care about trying to win or lose it, but like, how can I, what's called toying the game, where you play the game with a different objective. It's also what hacking is doing. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to use the software system, but for a different objective than it was intended, and really interesting things start happening. So I was just sort of trying to apply that to many different areas. In the process, I became really familiar with the materials of blockchain. And after sort of working with blockchain, I was just like, oh my God, I just want to work with this material all day long. You know, I don't even care about making conceptual art out of it anymore. Like, I just want to be surrounded by this material. And so I've really shifted the last 5 years into doing that.
You know, that's thinking about the blockchain as an artistic material is something that I have honestly never thought of, and that is a great way to put it.
There's so many.
I mean, I do think of the code that I write is inherently artistic. You know, it's a very creative endeavor, going in and saying like, okay, we have these various systems that are sort of heterogeneous in their own ways, and like, how do we marry them and like bring them together? And, you know, Cosmos is very much this bridge building community, and like a lot of the work that I've done has been, especially over the last couple of years, has all been bridges and stuff. And you know, there's this human element, there's this machine element, but there's also this, you know, creative element to the writing of the software that is inescapable. I've just never, as somebody who never had an artistic background like that sort of never clicked for me, but that's cool. I like that.
There's also an amazing crossover in general, which is the problem solving, which is going in the active flow. You know what I mean? And like, that is the most sort of satisfying way, no matter what industry activity you're doing. If you find something that you get flow from, that is extremely satisfying, where there's huge crossover.
You know, the activity like that I've seen recently is every day right after 10, there's an Osmosis Epoch block, and there's a ton of packets that need to be relayed. And man, the Go Relayer spits out some weird errors right now. And like, you can just go on there and produce as many weird errors and like hit as many edge cases as you possibly want. So that's where I've been lately. Cool. So, you know, I think the areas that we were talking about where the Cosmos ecosystem really needs some folks, organizations, people, you know, product leaders to come in and make their mark and really, you know, help take the state of the art where we are now, organize a bunch of disparate organizations, and bring forward some coherent products in this area. And what we're going to talk about is discoverability, relayers, validator operations, and sort of front-end engineering. So let's start with validators, because, you know, that's kind of the core of what Cosmos is, and that was a product I led for a while. And I think that, you know, we still do have the nicest to operate validator infrastructure, but what are some things that this product lead would sort of spearhead and bring forward that are important to kind of continue to maintain our lead in this validator infrastructure category?
So you listed 3 there, and actually one of them is part of 2 of the other ones, and it's really meant to be distinguished into 2. One is the discoverability, which includes a degree of validators and sort of node operators, like discovering nodes, operating these nodes, et cetera. The other one is relayers, which, you know, also is about running not validation nodes, but running nodes, but also serving and interacting with validators. So there's potentially like just a pure validator role between those, but right now the sort of roles are broken into 2 things. But the other sort of aspect of that, which would come from another area they didn't mention, which is just working generally with me on the Cosmos Hub, is that we need to be working much closer with validators. And I think that traditionally we took a real arm's length approach to it, because we wanted to make sure that there was no doubt about collusion, that it really wasn't us orchestrating this. We needed needed this network to be truly decentralized, to have independently motivated, independently operating people sort of participating and producing this network. And I think we really succeeded in that. However, it has gotten us to a point where we don't have the kind of product cycle feedback that is really important to making sure that the lives of those users are constantly being improved, and that the tools that they use, that we're able to sort of contribute to improving their lives and making sure that they have a good time running it and that they can have a successful business that way. You know, even the sort of business model for validators is multifaceted, and it's still not completely like shored up into a single story, which is also exciting. You know what I mean? There's many types of validator businesses which can exist, and we're starting to see more validators do more types of businesses, adding things on and going in different directions. I have a lot of ideas about what could be interesting that way as well, and excited to see how that develops. Nonetheless, just having a better relationship and understanding the user needs instead of these hodgepodge sort of like, yes, I run into validators. Yes, I happen to personally know a bunch of them. And whenever I get a chance, I talk to it. Being more systematic about it. I mean, setting up this validators verified channel in the Discord is the first step. We're going to start beginning some user feedback interviews with a bunch of different validators. So this work has begun, but in a way it falls on my shoulders as the product lead for the hub. Like these are in some ways my primary users. They're the people who run my code first, are the ones that matter the most first. And we have an exciting candidate joining, or new hire joining next week, who's also going to be helping with that. But I think when it comes to those other two roles, it becomes even more well scoped, which is discoverability. And that actually can span to many different things, which actually maybe we should pause before.
Yeah, before we jump into discoverability, there's a few things on the validator side I want to dig into. One of the things that is really amazing about the Cosmos community is those validators are all highly technical, and many of them publish open source software to help validators run services. In conjunction with that, there's also been this sort of Cambrian explosion of different validator architectures. I run primarily cloud validators, and I have this threshold signer that I run and maintain. And, that's sort of how I do it. Zucky over at Occlusion maintains the Tendermint KMS. So for the folks running sort of hardware-backed validators, there's numerous different ways to run. Sentry node architectures, different peering architectures with validators, different monitoring solutions. And, this person or, entity that wants to come in to do this, they would kind of need to figure out how to bring all of that together into something coherent and, also continue to encourage that sort of explosion of different community run projects. Would you say that's fair?
Absolutely. And actually it reminds me of another product that I've wanted to see for so long in the space. And we saw it very briefly for a while. Project launched and then decided to pivot. But it's basically like disinterested third-party validator evaluations, validator profiles, you know what I mean? Like statistics.
Oh,
almost
yeah.
Like Michelin reporting, how do you rank these? These are independently ranked because you have all these wallets also who list validators and they're like, well, how should I list it? Do I want to do commission rate lowest? Like, no, that encourages bad behavior. Do I want to do commission rate highest? Like, nobody wants to pick those validators. Do I want to selectively remove the people who I think are bad? Do I do it alphabetically? How useful is that? So there's only so much on-chain data that's there. But like to have a third party who's really monitoring, coming up with like a credit score for different validators, interviewing them, asking like, are you willing to talk about your architecture? Are you willing to prove that this is how your architecture looks? Are you keeping it secret because that's your trade secret? That's fine. Let's keep that reported. Are you distributed across multiple cloud platforms? Do you have threshold signatures? What are your security requirements? What are your, and be able to evaluate all that, put it on a giant sort of spreadsheet so that you can see all of it, and even boiling it down to a single number and saying, here's my rank of approval on this validator. Wallets could import that, sort by like 3 different, agencies reporting on validators and like give real user information about like, how do these work? Are there other benefits to these validators? Because that's another thing that I haven't seen yet that I would really like to see, where it's like, stake with me, you get access to my Netflix account. Stake with me, you get rebates on my relaying services. Stake with me, and you get a free email address.
Yeah, totally. Sisla over at OmniFlix, we're working on setting up gated Telegram channels where you have to sign in with Kepler to be able to like get into the Telegram channel. I think that there's a lot of room for differentiation there. But
super cool. I tried that out. It was like
it is. It's pretty cool. I'm looking forward to that being more widely deployed. I think they've got some technical work on their side to get that figured out. Which with the launch of OmniFlix Chain, totally understand why you guys haven't prioritized it. Lost that one. So
we started somewhere else, actually.
there's a lot of good
validator ranking services, third party.
Oh yeah, the validator ranking service thing. There's even some on-chain data that we're not really pulling right now. One thing that a lot of folks don't understand is when you see that uptime metric for validators, that's uptime only in the last 1,000 blocks. There's no really historical uptime for validators, which is something I would honestly love to see because I think I rank very, very well on that one.
That's why
I've had little. Yeah, that is why I want to see it because I work really hard to like make the to maintain high uptime and like I build software to help do that and like spend a lot of money, to run, 3 centuries and a couple of archive nodes to ensure that you have stable connection to the peer-to-peer network, maybe a seed or two, as well as threshold signers. You go from 1 node and you blow that infrastructure out into 6 to 8 pretty quickly. And, like the way that shows up is in longer term uptime data.
You could even justify higher commission rates because you can actually calculate, like this person with a low commission rate, they got slashed. Like you actually lost money by going with a low commission rate than by staying with a high commission rate who had uptime. I mean, I don't know if that's going to be the case when you crunch the numbers, but it could be, of course.
Well, like other things that would show up in the uptime data, Binance and a couple of the other exchange validators, Coinbase is slightly less guilty of this. I think Binance is kind of the biggest offender. They're often down for many hours after upgrades and are very slow to respond to any sort of on-chain issues. So I think being able to highlight that kind of stuff for folks would be great in terms of validator selection. So sort of related to this validator thing, talk to me about the relayer product role and sort of what that person needs to work on.
Yeah, so the relayer has always been this sort of like unspoken aspect of IBC, and I feel like a lot of people still don't understand it as part of it. And it's the unsung hero, and it is also sort of like split across different organizations, split across different stakeholders. There's sort of this question of who's going to have the business model that makes sense here. We just need to like make it happen first. But I mean, just for anybody who's not familiar with it, IBC packets go out of one chain, they go into the other. Somebody needs to move them back and forth. That's the role of a relayer. It can be anybody, but typically it's somebody who has some software who knows how to talk to different blockchains, who knows how to monitor, is there an outgoing packet, is there an incoming packet? So all of that capability is sort of wrapped up in the idea of what a relayer software implementation is. There's the Golang one, which has been built by Jack here, currently remaintained by Jack. There's a TypeScript relayer, which was built by Confio, and there's the Rust relayer built by Informal. Notice none of these were built by the IBC team or maintained by the IBC team. This was when push came to shove and resources were scarce, we spent the resources on building IBC, not the relayers. I mean, we have Jack here who kicked off a lot of the Golang relayers work. A lot of it was maintained by the IBC core team, but there was always, this sort of like confusing path of what direction is it going, who's responsible for it, when's the timeline on the Rust one, which we were expecting, prior or whatever reasons.
Well, also I would add there, the skill set required to build the on-chain pieces of IBC or like formal verification algorithms and like deep computer science background. And the skill set required to build a relayer is basically like sysadmin. And those are like really different mindsets that you have to bring to it. When you're building something to be like perfect and able to be formally verified, that's a different set of constraints than something that lives in this really messy real world system where you've got confusing on-chain state, many different software versions out deployed in the wild, unpredictable latency between these various services, congestion on the networks, and the relayer operators, have to deal with all that through software. And I think what we're seeing now with drop packets, a huge piece of that is, this sort of like burning in period of these different relayer implementations and kind of figuring out how to deal with all those sources of randomness.
It also points to a really interesting feature of decentralized application building and blockchain building, which is that you're building protocols. And in a lot of ways, that's meant to be like a base layer for other disinterested third parties to build their own businesses on top of. But there's this chicken and egg problem where it's like, you can't just build it and they will come. You also have to like feed it to them. Like, hey, this is the new like business that I just gave you. Like, please step up and start making money with it. Do I have to actually build this business first and then hand it off to you? And it's like, that's the one extreme version of it. The other one is like, don't do anything and wait till they show up and start doing it. And, I think that we've leaned towards that one, which has its benefits, but also has its drawbacks, because that means that people who come in, they're not coordinating with each other. There's multiple efforts that are parallel. None of them have the right lines of communication to the customers or the users that they're trying to sort of like serve. And so you've got this sort of like evolving, well, what is a relayer? Well, who's going to pay me for it? Well, when are they going to pay me for it? And like, I'm going to take a huge risk just by building this, because I haven't been served a fully featured like business model from it, and it's evolving, and I have to rely on you shipping the relayer incentives, or I have to like figure out like who are my customers and how do I put in service agreements. It's a messy problem, and we want to be able to like help people have that and make sure that that's possible. And I know you've probably done more than anybody in thinking of like, how do I make this a real business besides just being an altruistic, like, I want to see the internet of blockchains live, so I'm just going to keep doing this. And I think that, again, while there's benefits to like letting independent people discover that and build it for themselves, certainly it wouldn't hurt if we did a little more to help them.
Yeah, I mean, this is for folks interested in relayer incentivization, which has always been a hot topic with IBC. And I'll be quite honest, when we were doing the IBC calls and the initial discussions on relayer incentivization came up, I was one of the leading voices saying, we need to scrap this. Like, we need to figure this out in a later version. We need to ship without this. And, I have a strong opinion on that. Like, happy to sort of, I've talked about it previously on this show, but we are currently working on relayer incentives. Go check out Cosmos/IBC in the ICS 29 effort. Great work from Charlie and the rest of the IBC team on that. Please go check that out. And I believe that's going to require chain upgrades for each chain that's going to use that, right? They'll need to include that middleware.
I think it fails gracefully. Like, if it's present, it'll work, and if not, it like reverts.
Yeah.
But I have to double check.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that discussion, and they're going to do it that way. But that's going to be a huge improvement on what we have now. But one of the things that's kind of puzzling to me is with the relayer incentive stuff. I always figured these chains and the validators themselves have this huge incentive to get out there and connect these chains, because the trade between two previously closed economies creates this positive sum game. And what we're seeing with Osmosis, and to a lesser extent with the hub, is they're only incentivizing and working with smaller numbers of relayer operators and aren't trying to spread that spend out, really build this ecosystem a little bit. So, we'll see if that kind of continues to pick up. But the only other way to do relayer incentives currently is going to be kind of a coin operated model. And I think that that's what I'm planning on deploying eventually.
I think we're also seeing, though, still, even though it was March when IBC went live, and what was it or was it February when it went live and March when token transfers were enabled, or later than that, maybe May?
Yeah, that was it.
Anyways, we're still just so much at the beginning of this. There's a handful of networks which have actually performed the upgrade to have it, and only a couple of those have products which really make sense to benefit from that high-end use. There's only a couple of DeFi primitives there. We don't even have lending connected to the IBC. We don't even really have stable tokens present across IBC. So it's this sort of pressure to have these sorts of things hasn't even sort of fully erupted. And I think we're just going to see more and more of an increase until there's this tipping point where it's oh my God, this is a business. We need this yesterday. And there's just going to be tons of attention and resources on it. But, I want to try to get as far ahead of that as possible so that we're not there and just on these creaky legs and things are buckling under them. It's relayer role. One of the first things is just getting all of the people who are actually relaying together in a room, maybe every 2 weeks, because that has never happened. There's one Telegram group, which I don't even know if they're all in there. And I want to do some on-chain analytics with Flipside Crypto or something like that, and just see if I could, group by IBC transaction type, group by account address, and sort by number of transactions. How many relayers are there even? We don't even have somebody keeping track of this sort of thing. And then, bring them into a room and just be what do you need?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, there's a lot there. So anyway, if you're looking to make an impact on Cosmos, come be the relayer PM. It's great. Okay. The next one that kind of touches on this, on both the validator and relayer thing, is discoverability. So talk a little bit about that, because this is a near and dear topic to my heart as well, Billy.
Well, we called it Atlas first, which is an actual product. Atlas.cosmos.network is a module package manager, which is highly underpopulated. It is the solution to having the Cosmos SDK be an ultra minimal code base and having there be a really expressive large population of application-specific modules. Similar to Node Package Manager, they can live in a bunch of different places, but you use NPM to pull them into your code. Go actually has a package manager with GoMod, but it needs a package registry system. And we need Cosmos SDK module registry specifically. That's what Atlas performs. But that also has a Node Explorer. So if you go to atlas.cosmos.network/nodes, you can actually see what are all of the current nodes online from the Cosmos hub, at least what are the ones which didn't block the crawler's attempt to say, hey, are you there? Are you online? What endpoints do you have open? Are you serving things? Have you been online? How long have you been online? So this is basically a web crawler, a node crawler that Bez created. And it's really just one step in what is a larger category of services and needs across any blockchain, any peer-to-peer network system actually, which is what the hell's going on? If I want to join, if I want to talk, who do I talk to? How do I get started? There's this problem with peer-to-peer networks and decentralized networks in general that you need to trust one original participant in the network to be able to start talking to the rest of them. And if you talk to the wrong first person, they'll only lead you to other wrong people. And so you might think that you've joined this network with a bunch of imposters. So there's this crazy, another chicken and egg problem where you're like, I want to join the network. Who do I trust to join the network? I don't trust anybody. How do I join the network? And so you can, build a full node yourself, but how do you get information about the events that took place? You still need to trust somebody there. You can verify it. You can spread your net of who you're asking questions and who's replying in a trustworthy way. But all of that, requires different tools. They all have different requirements depending on how secure or how critical it is for it to be important. And just the tools of being able to perform those actions is really relevant to a lot of different people. Being able to even understand what is a Genesis file for this blockchain? How do I rebuild it? If I want to rebuild it, but I want to do it quickly, how do I use it with state sync? How do I download a snapshot and get it? So we have an independent service, which is providing that quick sync, which is really great. But there's other sort of much more critical and integrity-driven ways to do that. We've been working on this for a long time, but it's just hard to get people to even understand how to access those things. So you've done a lot of great work, Jack, on the Cosmos registry and the Cosmos registrar, which is the command line interface for helping people take this kind of information and submit it to a GitHub account, which is a very much a step towards a fully decentralized solution, which we hope to see on the Cosmos chain name server eventually, actually using a blockchain itself to track and record these different trust nodes, endpoints, who are the seed nodes, what's the snapshot of this last thing so that I can trust to rebuild from here, where do I find an open RPC endpoint? Even this idea of where do I find an RPC endpoint? We don't want to get in the full Ethereum world where they're using Infura. Everyone relies on Infura, so nobody runs a node. We want people to run nodes, but we also want people to be able to easily join and access things. So maybe it's services like Figment. What do you got?
And I think that having an on-chain registry for that stuff gets us one step closer to being able to fund that on-chain as well.
Exactly. I mean, I would like to see every single blockchain have 4 independently funded public service nodes, well load balanced, running on 4 different cloud services. So they're pretty trusted, they're pretty centralized, but they're free to use, and they're just good enough to get anybody started running on a blockchain. I hope this doesn't endanger business models for other projects who are selling this as a service, because I think it's an important service. Maybe they should be one of these services, you know what I mean? Be funded directly by every single blockchain.
Strangelove runs a ton of archive nodes, and we're going to figure out how to monetize that. But I think that that's a really hard business. The cost of entry is relatively low, and it's a lot of it is about quality of service, going out and finding new users. Kind of tends towards large companies, and if we can figure out a way to kind of crowdfund that, it provides more work for people in the ecosystem, and is one of these roles that can be fulfilled by anyone coming in. So discoverability product lead, again, hugely community focused, but also highly technical. So I think we were going to chat about JavaScript in front end as well, but if you're a JavaScript front end guru and you're looking for a challenge, we've got a bunch of great existing frameworks, a hugely passionate community, and a massive opportunity to make a huge impact in a lot of people's lives. So come work with us. One thing that I would be, sorry, Billy. Yeah.
I was just gonna say the one thing more than front end, I mean, you should love front end, but you should not be afraid of low level libraries, because that's what we really need, is somebody who can make the marriage between these badass low level libraries we have and all of the idiot JavaScript programmers like me who need to be spoon fed with examples every step of the way.
Yeah, and especially because the JavaScript ecosystem is so fragmented, I think that this one's extremely important. So my viewers would be very disappointed if I didn't at least talk to you a bit about shared security. I know that, based on the conversations we've had, you are getting much more involved in that, and that effort is picking up steam quite a bit. the Tharsis and Ethermint teams, the Osmosis teams, a few of the other teams across the ecosystem are really starting to put serious resources behind this. Talk a little bit about sort of how shared security is evolving as an idea and how the resourcing behind it has picked up, especially over the last month or two.
Yeah. So I think what's important to know about interchain security is that it's a technology which will be multi-phased in the development of it. There's the simplest version that we want to do first, and there's more advanced versions that we want to do afterwards. To get to those more advanced versions, obviously we need to go through the simple ones. What's kind of exciting about that, though, is that even after that process, the simple ones end up having a different user base from the more advanced ones, but they're both still valid, interesting uses. And so we'll have the first version and it'll continue to basically grow, but it'll still be that stepping stone to the second version. And the version 1 is the full validator set of the parent chain, the Cosmos Hub in this case. And that means that the entire validator set, the parent chain, has agreed to start operating the state machine of a child chain. And in doing so, they've all agreed to risk their atoms should they do a bad job operating on this child chain, because typically they risk their atoms when they do a bad job on the parent chain. Now they're risking their atoms for doing a bad job on the child chain. And what that means is that this child chain is going to be modified slightly. So it looks like a normal blockchain in every way, except for that the staking module has basically been swapped out with this IBC module called cross-chain validation. And what that does, so typically a staking module keeps track of all of the tokens that everyone has delegated to all of the validators who have signed up to be validators. And it says, cool, give me that list, put them in the order that I need for Tendermint, and hand them up to the Tendermint algorithm, which then identifies the actual computers in the world who are represented by the public keys in that list. They're allowed to produce blocks. And interchain staking, that list doesn't come from the staking module. It doesn't come from the token balances of the child chain. That list just is handed to the child chain from the parent chain. So the parent chain already did that same thing. It used the staking module to get that list, handed it up to Tendermint. That was the hub. The hub's running. That's how it works. It takes that list, sends it to the child chain, and says, hey, here's your list of validators. Use this, send it to Tendermint, find the people with those public keys, and then let them produce those blocks. So it's the same people running different instances of different blockchains, but identified with the same mechanism and risking the one original asset, the atom, in order to perform those operations on those two different networks.
How does that drive, so, and assumedly the validators like accrue income based on that, correct?
So the child chain is able to produce fees, inflation rewards through its own token. That's also one of the sort of exciting mechanisms behind that. So maybe I should also back up. One of the primary features of this version is actually scalability, security, and sovereignty for modules on a single blockchain. So if you've got the Cosmos Hub, for instance, and let's say the DEX gets so wildly successful that we're starting to see Ethereum-style gas auctions to get transactions, we've got a problem, right? We've now got too many transactions coming into a single blockchain. The Hub's trying to do other stuff. It's trying to do IBC packet routing. It's trying to do chain name service at this point. It's trying to do Starport, Genesis stuff, all sorts of stuff. You know what I mean? So one thing it can do is break itself into two separate blockchains. Move the DEX module into another blockchain. Move one of the other modules into another blockchain. That blockchain uses interchain security, which means it's essentially secured the exact same integrity as the original Cosmos Hub as a single one, but now it has two different endpoints. So this is where you get your transactions. It has twice the scalability. This is what we've always talked about with horizontal scalability versus vertical scalability. You can push the transactions per second as far as you can. With Tendermint, there will eventually be physical limit. You just won't get past that. At that point, you just create another blockchain. And if you're able to secure that other blockchain to the same degree as the first, then you have no downgrade in terms of basically services. You do have a little bit more in terms of coordination. You now have separated state, and if you need shared state, then you use IBC to coordinate between that state. But when it's a single module, it can be really clearly demarcated and scale that way. The other cool thing about that is that you've now decreased the security surface, the attack surface, and the single point of failure. Because if this child chain happens to have a bug, stops producing blocks, the original chain keeps going. It's fine. It's not halted by this thing. So one of the big fears about putting more and more features on the hub is this idea of practical hub minimalism. It needs to be have a huge degree of integrity. It needs to be online. It needs to be secure. And the more things we add, the more chances there's a bug. If there's a bug, that's bad for the entire thing. Whereas you can break it off into separate machines. If there's a bug, the other ones aren't affected at all. And the third thing, which gets kind of exciting, is this idea that when you've got a blockchain that starts having multiple features, you start getting a little bit further away from this idea of sovereignty that we all think is so important in the Cosmos space. You know, for an application-specific blockchain to have a single governance system that is only dedicated to making that blockchain run well, you know, is the benefit of like, cool, we're all on the same page about this. It's not Ethereum where you've got thousands and thousands of different applications, all have different needs and different demands from the blockchain, and some of them are going to get left out. You know, you're not able to be fairly represented as a user inside this blockchain, but if it's just a single application on each blockchain, there's going to be a match between that. But imagine putting a few applications on the same blockchain. You might start getting into that territory, so you can block them out into separate state machines, create a governance token for each of them. I mean, they're still ultimately secured by the same atom, but you've now separated the responsibility of the atom for governing those different chains. Each chain has its own governance system. It can decide when to do updates. It has its own development cycle. It decides when it does releases. It's no longer attached to all of the schedules of all the other applications, which it used to be bundled with.
Yeah, you know, I think that this there's a very strong use case for moving Gravity out onto its own chain, and you know, that's one of the things that this discussion has brought out for me. So that's we're very quickly running out of time here, and we do have some excellent audience questions, and one in particular that I'd love your thoughts on, Billy. Crypto Devons asks, how do we deal with exchanges validating networks in the long term as they don't contribute to governance?
Well, actually.
Actually.
So I'm going to go in the normal answers first, which are, I think one of the biggest, well, earlier in the conversation, we talked about this like validator ranking system. Certainly, if we started using a system like that to evaluate which is a good idea, which is a bad idea, exchanges would start factoring low on different factors. But what is the real danger is that exchanges, it's always attractive to keep your money on an exchange, like a bank. You know, a bank can hold everybody's money, and then they can do interesting things with that money. They can earn money with it, and they give you benefits like, you know, points on your credit card because they're off making money with they might as well give you a little bit of it and keep you around and keep you happy. So they can do something like that with exchanges. You know, you can move your tokens, you can buy and you can sell them, but they might also give you some of the staking rewards because they've locked up a fair enough portion of their staking rewards that they're able to get them back. That's extremely like nice user experience. And that's only going to encourage more use of exchanges, which will lead to hub centralization and potentially security vulnerabilities in that category. Staking derivatives is, of course, the proposed solution to this, making it possible for independent validators to compete with exchanges on the same transferability of otherwise staked assets. And if you're not familiar with that concept, essentially it means that you've got Atom bonded to a validator, you're earning staking rewards with it. However, you want to put that Atom, say, in a CDP and take out a stable token so that you can double down on Atom because you want to go so long on it. You're able to create a derivative of that locked Atom. And by a derivative, I mean basically a voucher or a coupon. This coupon, it represents the ability to redeem those original Atoms, which are still locked and still earning staking rewards. So now this redeemable coupon is transferable as a new token type. I can use it in this collateral system. I can use it in other DeFi projects. I can lend it to somebody. I can do all these sorts of fun things. So now I have the same capabilities as the exchange user, but even more because I'm able to participate in DeFi, whereas an exchange user is always going to be locked up on their single platform.
Yeah, that's a token that says, I have future cash flows associated with this token. And as anyone who has worked in finance in the past knows, that is 90% of how finance works.
Exactly. The other thing that came to mind was, so I did a really fun brainstorming session with Callum the other day. If you haven't met Callum, engineer on the 10
I need to have him on.
He's great. He's great. Kiwi. He's been doing some work on the governance module and the groups module with Sam, really great stuff. And I wanted to understand for a child chain in the Interchain security system, what are the options for them to have a governance token that requires the least amount of work? Because right now our governance module is tightly integrated with the staking module and the entire staking system of a typical Tendermint-based chain. And if we were to have, instead of staking module, this cross-chain validation module, can we still use governance? What are the changes we need to do? Should we replace governance? Should we tweak governance? Should we start using the groups module? Should we double down on that timeline and extend groups module to the point that it actually could replace governance itself?
I think that's a great path.
I mean, that's a long-term one though. That definitely is a larger list. I think that the capabilities that are coming out of the groups module are, enough for an entire podcast itself.
This is one of the things that I just keep talking about all the time. I'm like, you guys have no idea. Groups is going to show up and suddenly like things are going to get real weird, because a lot of these on-chain treasuries, people don't want to deploy them right now because it's super clunky and hard to do. Yeah. With the groups module, not only is that going to be really easy to do, there's going to be excellent transparency and controls on that. And suddenly you're going to start seeing things like somebody going to the Cosmos Hub treasury and saying, hey, this group of 10 people wants to go invest in various DeFi protocols throughout Cosmos, and we're going to bring the returns back to the treasury. And we want like X fee here. And like, that's going to happen real quick. People aren't going to be prepared for it. Yeah.
To wrap up though, the governance conversation, what we landed on and what we think is actually the best is a very minimal change to the staking module, where you remove from init chainer and you remove from end blocker the flush to tendermint of the validator set. So the staking module still works completely normal. It's no longer telling tendermint about its current state. That's not its job anymore. It does still have delegations, still has validators, still has a token. We might decide to remove the bonding period or lower it or something like that, but actually there's a benefit in having that bonding period there, specifically because of how our governance system was working. Governance has these proposal periods. During that entire period, the voting takes place. It's only at the very end of it that it's calculated, and it's calculated all at the same time. And so it's not that, as soon as a threshold is met, it changes, or that at any given moment, like, is it true or is it false? It has to be run through every single vote at the end. And so if you have hundreds of thousands of users who are all voting, that's like a potentially really problematic vote. I mean, that's why we have, these delegations. You just count all of the validators' votes, that's 150 or 125, depending on the day, and plus any other normal users who voted outside of that. It's just like a different structure that you would want to use unless you had like a more traditional token voting system like Aragon or something like that. And so we were like, all right, well, how can we like preserve as much of that as possible? So like, wait a minute, like we can just keep the staking system. Validators aren't registering as validators. They're basically registering as representatives in governance. You're not, your job isn't to reduce blocks anymore. Your job is just to represent people in governance, and you get a commission rate for it. So now it's like full on politician governance module. There's no double responsibility that I have to run infrastructure and produce blocks. I just have to be like really opinionated, really smart, and like help drive this project in the direction that it deserves to go, and convince people that I'm the person to follow. And you get paid for doing it. I mean, it's straight up pay for play politics, which is insanely scary, but also like kind of exciting as this entire new industry.
I mean, it's kind of how politics already works. And like, we've already created like on-chain companies. Like, what is proof of stake besides a equity distribution? Right. And then, we're about to create on-chain politics, which like, people to get things happen. Like,
it's not fully pay to play. I mean, pay to play is typically you pay the politician and they do what you want. This is just, paid representation. So it's actually better because you're not getting paid by the big business to represent their interests instead of your constituents, but your constituents are paying you because they think you're doing a good job. That's actually the relationship we should have between politicians and people.
Strong agree. One last audience question before we wrap this, and a short answer totally fine here as well.
Oh, I forgot the most important part about that. The whole point is that people won't be staking to these exchanges. They'll be staking to normal people. That was it.
Yeah, I agree. And these are these are the things that we're working on to counteract this issue that kind of everyone sees with this system. Promod Rohit, which, broke his streak last week, the first week where there was no Promod question in a very long time, read the blog on Interchain security. When do you think it's practically possible for chains to try out a version? And I think more importantly, how can they prepare? So like, how can chains prepare for Interchain security?
So the first version of Interchain security we're going to see is really basically an extension of the hub itself. It's the one that I said is the full validator set. It's almost a premature optimization in that it's, scalability, it's also security, it's also sovereignty, but it is a necessary first step to getting to the version that becomes especially exciting for independent chains who are trying to bootstrap and launch. Of course, there's nothing technically preventing a completely independent new blockchain from showing up, making a governance proposal that says, hey, entire Cosmos validator set, like, I'm going to be such a successful network because I have cool project, cool token economics. Don't you want to receive a portion of my fees and in exchange give me the full security of the Cosmos Hub validator set? If they make a strong case, the validators agree to it, if the token holders agree to it, that'll happen. There's nothing that can prevent that. And that's really exciting. My expectation, though, is that the easiest thing and the least controversial will be the things that the validators are already expected to be running, which are modules that are on the Cosmos Hub. I think that's, something that'll be easy for them to swallow, make it a little bit easier for them to come under the idea like, all right, you know what, let me risk these atoms across the board. Let me get my delegators paid by all of these different networks. Let me strike a deal. And so when it comes to that version of it, that's a bit more of the version 2. And I think that that's going to be much more of, it's a more complicated version of interchain security because we want these child chains to be able to have really interesting and robust economic models as well as security models. And so we call this second version layered security. And it's where the child chain actually still has a staking token because as we've seen, there's lots of chains who are doing it. It's not impossible. It can be tough, but once you're there, it's extremely good to have your own security. There's a lot of interest in that sovereignty. There's really cool things happening with having your own token. I'm not going to argue against that. That doesn't mean that you wouldn't benefit from having a closer relationship with the Cosmos Hub, that you wouldn't benefit from added security from the atom, basically mutual insurance. There's all sorts of other compounded services which become available when you have a relationship like that with the Hub. You basically become part of the blessed Cosmos atom ecosystem. There's business relationship possibility. There's token swaps between the community pools. There's sort of interesting, cool Atom Club things also become possible. But nonetheless, this is all to say it's part of a larger product, which is chain launching. And chain launching is really in the domain of Starport Network, which I'm really excited to see start being a little bit more public about their developments. I think they just finished one of the first MVPs that is running on test nets, but Tendermint Inc. likes to work in secret and surprise these days, so they're keeping pretty mum about it. But I've been getting some sneak previews. I'm really excited. I think it's one of the most important products to have in the ecosystem, which is chain starting. You know what I mean? How do I find my validators? Yep. How do I sell my token in a centralized way that's legally compliant? How do I compose a strong initial validator set? Or how do I get in line for interchain security? These are all sort of like product offerings that should be on that plate of launching a chain, getting started. How do I register a chain ID? What is my chain ID? How do I get in line for it? What do I have to pay for it? Do I have to pay anything for it? This is the sort of relationships that become established with Starport Network and the sort of matchmaking between validators and new networks.
Awesome. I'm super stoked for that too, Billy. So Billy, thank you very much for joining us today. One last quick point. I did not talk about Prop 56, but if you haven't voted, get out there and do so. And thank you to the almost 2,000 Atom holders who have already voted yes on that proposal. So thank you guys. We have 10% of stake voting, and I foresee us getting to quorum sometime in the next week. I'm really hoping to get quorum before the first week is over. So working hard.
Get in the discussion, everybody. Get in the discussion because it's a really interesting topic. And I'm still really excited about every single day. There's new sort of angles on the whole thing. I want to see where it goes. I love the idea of the hub as a router, and I want to find out the best way to make that happen. And I want to make sure that this conversation is participated in. I see it happening in a lot of really great chat channels. But we should get it on the forum. I mean, isn't that where this governance stuff is going to be? Because that's where it's sort of permanent. These chats.
Yeah, I guess I got it up in the GitHub governance thing. I need to get it in the forum.
You've got questions waiting for you in the GitHub. You know what I mean? That's where people who aren't keyed into the Discord and the Telegram get to follow it. Months later. That's where the our archaeologists and the historians are going to go and look for where was the conversation. Yes. I actually was thinking about posting, if I could, of the Discord and the Telegram to a forum. So if you do make a post, let me know, and I'll try to transfer some of that knowledge there. Because I think it's really interesting to see the conversation evolve. For sure. Yeah, I'm going to put up an ICS for that too. Bucky, I got you. So anyway, Billy, thank you very much for joining us this week. It was super informative. And again, at the end, ask not what the hub can do for you. Ask what you can do for the hub. We need help. Come work for Cosmos. We need a moon. Yes. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me, Jack. Billy is actually the moon. Go talk to Billy. Admin reveal. So anyway, thank you again to our sponsors, Sommelier Finance and OmniFlix Network. Go check them out. They're great folks. And we'll see you guys next week. I think we have Albert from Injective Labs coming next week, which will be a great show. We're going to dive deep into Peggy and cross-chain bridging and all of the things Ethereum Cosmos. Let's go.